class. So, this week we're going over the Civil War. Tonight we're going over part one, the differences. I wanted to give you good information about both the sides, the North and the South. So, later events such as battles or key people makes more sense that you have a better understanding of the two parties. I also wanted to introduce the activity we're going to be doing. The activity is going to be presented on Friday, and you're going to work on it all week in class, so don't worry. This activity, I'm going to break the whole class into two different teams, the Northerners and the Southerners. And as a group, you're going to create a skit where you discuss which side you believe will actually win the war. And the skit is going to be set in the middle of the war, so some battles have been won, some battles have been lost, gives you kind of good information, juicy information to use for the skit, because I want the skit to be creative, informative, and memorable. So I want you to be able to use this skit to help you study for the test. And then also part of this skit, if you're a Northerner, you don't have to think that the North will win. You could think the South would win. That's not the whole point. I want you to discuss the two different sides, the strengths, the weaknesses, and just kind of go over the information in a creative way. So, an introduction to the Civil War. It happened between 1861 and 1865. The two different sides were the North, known as the Union or the United States of America, and the South, known as the Confederate States of America or the Confederation or the Confederates. I might interchange these terms, but they are the same. So I also have a good picture of the Confederate flag up there. And then Abraham Lincoln was president during this time. He actually ran for re-election during the war. And 700,000 people died during this war, and it's the bloodiest in American history. And two-thirds of the casualties were actually from infection and disease rather than just battle wounds. So that's a key piece of information. And then the causes of the war. Lincoln tried to say that one of the causes of the war was preserving the Union and their ideas and their culture, and he kind of said that to downplay the actual reason, which was slavery and the abolishment of slavery or continuing slavery. And then there was kind of a religious aspect. Each side believed that their way was the best way and God was supporting their ideas and their culture. So each side had a religious aspect to going into war, but the real reason was slavery. And the states that became the Confederate States of America were South Carolina, which actually passed the Bill of Secession, and Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas followed suit, and they were the original 7 states to secede. And then the next 4 states who actually seceded after Lincoln demanded 75,000 soldiers to fight. They were North Carolina, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Virginia. And I kind of have the different states all arranged because that helped me study and visualize the different states and their shapes. And then I also found this great map. I'm sorry that's fuzzy, but it kind of takes the South out in kind of a chunk, and you can see that this was the South, this was the Confederation, and then this was the North. And then actually, not every slave state became part of the Confederation. 4 slave states actually stayed in the Union, and they were Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, and Missouri. They were slave states, but they stayed within the Union. So these are kind of us comparing and contrasting differences between the North and the South. And the North's population was over double the population of the South, with 22 million compared to 9 million. And then the manufacturing percentage was far higher, with 90% in the North compared to the 10% manufacturing in the South. The North produced a lot of iron, guns, boots, textiles compared to the South. Then the North also had twice as many railroad miles, with 20,000 miles compared to the South 10,000 miles. The railroad allowed the North to travel faster and travel more things compared to the South. And then kind of like goes along with the population, with the enlisted men, with the North having 2 million enlisted men compared to the South 900,000 enlisted men. Kind of goes along with the population. So that was just a brief comparison of the North and the South. So the North, and there's another one. The North also had a more diverse industry with agriculture, and then the South was only based on agriculture. I like this chart. It kind of gives you like a quick little look at it. The economy based on free labor versus slave labor. North having more immigrants versus South. Of course, the South used slaves compared to immigrants as their economy. So I kind of like this compare and contrasting. So the North, these are a few advantages and disadvantages for the North. The North had more financial resources, it had a greater industry base in manufacturing, also had control of the Navy, and when you're at war, having control of the Navy is kind of a plus for you, and also had better transportation with the trains and a larger population, like I said. Now, some of the disadvantages were they lost a lot of battles. They lost so many battles within the first 2 years that the South started to think they would win. And this was due to a lack of strong military leadership until Ulysses Grant and his idea of fighting. He didn't really think about the casualties he would lose. He was just all for fighting. And then this is him, and I liked how he's on the $50 bill, and I kind of connected to the financial resources of the North. So I liked how that tied together. And then the North was playing offensive. They went to the South to fight compared to the South coming to them. So that was also a disadvantage for the North. Now, for the South, some of the advantages were they had better military leadership. They won a lot of wars at the beginning, and this was in part due to Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Jeb Stuart. The South was actually fighting for their freedom. You wouldn't think that the South was fighting for freedom, but they were fighting for their freedom from the U.S., not just to keep slavery, they were fighting for freedom themselves. And then they also had home turf advantage. They understood the land, they knew where to go, they knew where to hide, and they're also fighting for their own homes and their families, which is pretty inspirational and you want to defend your own home. And they were playing defense. The North had to come to them, they had to travel to them, and the South could sit and wait. And the South was big. The North had to go a long way to get to them. So that was another advantage for the South. Some disadvantages were they didn't really have a significant banking system or transportation system. They had half as many miles of railroad as the North, and they didn't have any large manufacturing sectors. They had small ones scattered around. And they were starting a new nation from scratch. They had just left the US and were building up their nation. And what they really needed was resources and a foreign patron. And they thought Britain would help them because they supplied Britain with their cotton. But Britain ended up going to India for their cotton needs. So later this week, we're also going to be talking about major battles, which is really good for your skits, and results of the war, as well as amendments, and that will give you a lot more information to use, and that's coming up this week. And for this activity, we'll go over a little more in detail now. I want each group, Northern and Southerners, to make a skit where they discuss the strengths and weaknesses of both the North and the South, and discuss key battles, who won, who lost, casualties, And the skit will be graded on 3 different aspects. Accuracy of information. I want you to be able to use this for your test. I want you to use this to study. I don't want the skit to have an alien invasion that helped the North. That's not very accurate. It's creative, but not very accurate. So I want it to be creative as well as sticking to the truth of it. And participation will actually be graded by your other group members. Each group will have a survey where, well, each group member will have a survey where they grade other classmates and see how they participated, and that's where I'll get the participation grade from. And this isn't to say that everyone has to present. Some people may feel better finding out all the information, making sure the skit's accurate as possible, and that's fine as long as the group members agree on that. And then extra credit, you can add this to your skits or not, but I want to see if you guys can come up with a song or a rap about the Civil War. It could be like a battle or a state or something, but I want to see what you guys come up with. So I hope you have a great night. I'll see you in class tomorrow. Bye.